you hear these fucking people, they talk about, and look, credit to them, but they're just wrong. Like, you hear people argue with me, like Ethereum people. They're like, oh, you can't do anything on Bitcoin, da-da-da. I'm like, cool, man. Like, the earth is like Ethereum. There's roller coasters, there's playgrounds, there's shit everywhere. But at the end of the day, it's all sets its watch to the sun, and the sun is Bitcoin.
Hello and welcome to Bitcoin with Jake. This is a podcast all about people's personal journeys to Bitcoin. I wanted to know more about the people converging on this new form of money. Why do they see value in it? What skills enable their understanding? How is it changing their lives? If you're a founder looking for funding or an investor looking to make investments, then please reach out as I develop my network in the space. Do me a favor and chuck us a 5-star rating on whichever app you're using to listen, or a like if you're watching it somewhere. As insignificant as this may seem, they help a startup project like this hugely. Lastly, if you have any questions at all, please just reach out. The easiest place to find me is on Twitter at Jake E.S. Woodhouse. Now, I'd like to take a quick moment to talk about our sponsor. Fastbitcoins are a Bitcoin exchange who you should definitely take a look at next time you're thinking of making a Bitcoin purchase. They're a great team, which for me is always the key to due diligence, whilst their product has a ton of features useful to every Bitcoiner. Check out my episodes with Danny Brewster, the founder CEO, and Nathan Smith, the Chief Compliance Officer, to learn more about the people behind the brand. Thank you to Fastbitcoins for sponsoring the show. Now, on to today's episode. Today I'm speaking with Mike Dunworth. Welcome, Mike. How are you?
Good. Thanks for having me, Jake. It's great to be here.
My pleasure. I'm very excited to hear your story, I must confess. So to kick things off, there was a time, whenever that might have been, that someone said to you, hey, Mike, have you looked at this thing called Bitcoin? Wind back to whenever that was. Teach us a little bit about your introduction to Bitcoin.
Yeah, I've got a boring one, an accidental one. Let's call it accidental. You know, I used to work in financial planning software, a company called Midwinter in Sydney. And I think we were talking about it. There was a couple of guys at work who were talking about it. And then a friend of mine approached me. He's like, hey, I think we all basically chucked in to go buy some Bitcoins basically at the time. More as a novelty. It was like, I came at more from a video games perspective where I was like, oh, this is sick. Finally, like a currency for all these games that could have the same currency basically. So if you're playing World of Warcraft or whatever your jam is, this currency, they're kind of all speaking the same language. And I felt like that would be really cool. Just from a game perspective, games being interoperable with a single currency would be awesome because there's so much time and effort that people put into games. I know I've wasted a ton of my life on video games. So for me, I was like, oh, this would be cool if all the wasted time on video games could be ported to if I was earning gold in these games, it'd be cool if that was Bitcoin. So that just sort of like pulled the thread for me. And then from there, it was sort of, got more involved in the space, maybe a year and a half later. So that was sort of like 2012, I think, that I first got a whiff of it. See, some people get a look at Bitcoin because it comes to them much more organically because, they're looking for a censorship resistant money or some anti-establishment money, all these different angles that people come at. And I found it so interesting just seeing like the different angles. Everyone stumbles across it accidentally almost. And it feels like everyone's got this different journey of accidentally tripping over it. I feel like I got super lucky and accidentally got into it. It was sort of just hey, let's, have a crack and have fun with it. But it turned out to basically be the be all and end all of life as I know it, which is was pretty good. Yeah.
How amazing. So 2012, 10 years ago now, and that decade just has flown by. And I know in that time, you've been able to head to the States, build a business. There's been a bunch of different stuff you got involved in, of which Bitcoin was part of it. So yeah, talk to me. How did you end up going from being in Sydney, being in financial planning software, coming across Bitcoin and ending up, going to the States and starting companies?
Well, I mean, I had a startup in Australia that I was doing at the time while I was working full time, and it was like a restaurant reservation booking system. Anyway, that was like really exciting to do. Like doing like just the whole journey of like building something, getting a customer, watching someone book something online, whatever it was really exciting. So, actors go to Hollywood to try and make it. Nerds go to San Francisco. At least that's how it was sort of at the time. So I was like, fuck it, let's go. One-way ticket. It's kind of like saying, like if you're a good footy player and you're a club, go play for, a stateside or, go play for the next bigger comp or team or whatever. And so I always thought like San Francisco is sort of that, like, if the best of the best are there, the best opportunities are there, the best talent's there. So I got on a one-way ticket. I was living in a hacker house when I got there, which the best definition that I could think of Imagine an orphanage with Wi-Fi. That's what it feels like, which is basically like 30 or 40 people crammed into like this two, like some schmuck engineer that's 21 is renting it out for $4,000 a month, and he's got 18 beds in there with bunk beds, charging each person $1,000.
Wow.
He's killing it. They were just printing money, and so that's where I moved into. But that was really awesome because I met my co-founder. He was the one on the bunk bed above me, and see, it becomes a hub where all these people are sort of in transit. Like, my co-founder was there for a job placement or something that his job moved him out there for training, and you've got other people that are there. The first person I met, actually, when I walked into the hacker house, like the door got flung open. I got out of the airplane, like out of the airport, on my way to this place in San Francisco. And I'm like sort of sitting there, big dreams and shit like that. Like, oh, cool, I'm here. And this is so exciting. I'm pulling my bag in, and the door like flies open and almost like whacks me out. And it's a dude like, I'm running to go to a meeting with Andreessen Horowitz. And I was like, in my head, I was like, this is 2013. And I was like, holy shit, I'm really here. I'm really in this bitch. This is good. Like, this is what you want,
Yeah,
You're
it's exciting.
It's so exciting, dude. It's like, I mean, yeah, I don't know what.
Mike, how old were you at the time?
26. 20,
Wow.
yeah, 26. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's crazy. And so this is the kind of thing I love. So I often find this correlates in some senses, but what was it that drove you to do that, do you think? So you were like in your mid-20s, you were in Australia, you'd grown up in Sydney, and you had this inbuilt desire to go to a place that you knew was a more effective like talent pool for building companies. Like, do you always know you wanted to go into entrepreneurship, and where does that kind of influence come from?
Definitely, like my family's full of entrepreneurs. Like, my dad's an entrepreneur. He was a truck driver and then built a company that focused on, trucks and waste management and stuff like that. But he just grinded. Brother's the same. Mum was the same. She was a hairdresser and stuff like that. So they've always sort of been entrepreneurial, but you've got to have like, and I know it sounds kind of hectic, but just being real, like you've got to have some sort of purpose, right? Like in life, right? Your goal is to do something, to add value, to give it a go. So I've sort of always been like, well, fuck it, let's go. Like before I have a mortgage, before I've got kids and shit, which I was 26 at the time, I didn't have either. I was like, well, life's only going to get harder from here. So I may as well try and YOLO it now. And look, if I fuck up and shit the bed, whatever. I'll be back in 3 months. It's all good. My job will still be there. There's risk, but there's just so much more risk in not taking the risk almost. Do you know what I mean? Like you've got, well, I was fortunate enough to have like the, I don't know, I felt like life would be okay if it didn't go well. And I think that's sort of probably the biggest, most important thing for people taking risks is like just having that baseline and, having support from family and friends. Like when I first wanted to move over to America, it was like, don't do that. And I'm like, obviously I'm an adult, but my parents are like, dude, I've dropped out of 3 universities. I did well in some subjects at school, but basically, if you're a parent, your job is to basically make sure if you die or get hit by a car or whatever, that your kid's going to be a value-adding citizen, not a piece of shit, kind of. Like, that's how I think about it, right? If I was a parent. So in my head, like if my parents, I'm like, oh guys, sorry, there's a pen, it's got a light on it. It's the worst. It's so inconvenient. Yeah, literally, you do anything and it's just blinding. But so I was talking to them and I was like, so this kid, imagine this kid, he goes through school, he's okay. He goes to uni, drops out, goes to uni again, drops out. So between this, I've been bartending, bricklaying, and just in and out of uni, right? Just doing whatever. And so obviously I found this job in finance and it was going really well. And my parents were like, oh, finally, the shitheads kind of landed something that feels sort of stable. And then obviously, so they're cheering.
They're loving it, yeah.
Of course, they're cheering. They're like, woohoo. And then, but then I come with them with the, oh, guys, I was thinking of going to San Francisco maybe. And they're like, we just got you on the, like, we just kind of got you on the straight and narrow almost, it feels. Not the straight and narrow, but, a peace of mind, a path. And it doesn't mean that they think that's right. They've always encouraged me to do my own shit. But they're just more like, look, if you're lost or you're trying to figure shit out, just jump into a safe kind of narrative that makes sense. But yeah, no. So I don't know how we got there, but I was sort of saying.
No, well, I was intrigued by
having that push, having that.
Yeah, just it's that baseline of risk analysis essentially. That's what I find interesting. How do people make decisions? So you said to yourself a number of different kind of facts that made a difference. Which is, you didn't have any kids at the time, you didn't have a mortgage, you're 26. Well, what have I got to lose? And actually, I've got more to lose by not doing this. And that's brilliant. Like, I wish more people thought in that way. Okay, and so we fast forward, you got to the States, you're 26, you're
Well,
raring to
yeah,
go. Some bloke like beats you out the doorway on the way to
yeah,
Andreessen Horowitz. You're like, take me with you. And you
yeah,
met your co-founder. Holy
yeah.
shit. And
Dude,
sorry.
I'm riding the circle jerk.
Yeah, but what I
Yeah.
didn't ask though is, did you have a technical background? So as a founder going to San Fran, were you a developer, or that was just you just interested in
No, not
entrepreneurship?
really. Like, I'm a tinkerer. I'm a tinkerer, but like, would not be a developer at all. Like, as
Okay.
in enough to get a V0 done kind of thing, but not like, I'm not an engineer by trade and didn't study computer science or anything like that.
Yeah, because I often find people go, "Oh, I couldn't do that. I don't know how to build anything or whatever." Do you know, it's like perhaps an
Yeah.
excuse people use in some senses. But obviously, every company needs not just people that can build stuff. You got to have
Yeah.
all sorts of different parts of a team. So
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah. Well, I did
More
more
about-
stuff like, yeah. Well, sorry. Yeah. So my co-founder he's on the bunk and above. He's got a job. I was doing something else at the time. Like, I came over with an idea that I was trying to execute on that I thought, try and go through the rings in America and do. But once I got here, once I got to America, I was just like, dude, this is taking a stale idea into the Thunderdome. Like, I need to sit here and absorb everything and drink it in, and then sort of start reevaluating. And it's obviously hard. That becomes a sunken cost fallacy sort of scenario there for you, where if I've done engineering work or whatever it is on a project for months in advance, and then you go to this place and you sort of think, I can already see it's not cool and not cool enough. But do you know what I mean? Like, you feel like you haven't like gone big enough. And so you're like, oh, well, like right now, it's not exciting to think about a calendar app, right? That's not really exciting to me because it's like, and it's like, there's 1,000 calendar apps. Like, you want that points of differentiation and going really big to sort of dream really big. So yeah, I found Yanni, my co-founder, on the bunk bed above me, and we just jammed together on stuff. He'd heard about Bitcoin. I'd heard about Bitcoin. We always thought it was really cool. And we thought, well, this is super exciting. It's pumping as well, because that was 2013, right? So 2013, we had, the bull run to 400, and then it went down to like 30 or something, and then it ran up again and topped out on, I think, November 28th, and that was 1,250 or something like that on Bitfinex. Wow. Which is basically the price my dad bought it at. I was like, oh, Dad, you got to get into this Bitcoin thing. He's like, goes and buys one. Literally, it went down.
Wow.
He set the top of the market, which is thanks very much for doing that. Appreciate it.
Wow. And so what was the kind of original pain point that you came across that you guys wanted to solve?
So the main thing was Bitcoin was popping off. It was going really well, but you couldn't spend them anywhere. So people were selling them back to their money in their bank account. And we're like, oh, it's such a bummer, because if everywhere accepted Bitcoin, people that are making this money can go buy stuff with it. So it'd be so cool to be able to go to Amazon and do Christmas shopping and all this stuff with your essentially money that you made quite easily, let's say, or these returns. So if people were trying to take profit or something, we thought this would be awesome. So basically, we built a browser extension, which is you went on any website, and what would happen is you'd go and buy buy the things on the website. So you go to Zara or Newegg or Amazon, and you'd create your shopping cart. And then when you go to check out, we'd pull all the information and generate a Bitcoin invoice for you. You'd pay us in Bitcoin, and we'd fulfill the shopping cart order. And so we charged a fee on that. And so basically, we were like a buying service for people. And so what we did was we were a merchant processor, really. So they would pay us, and we'd basically go and buy the products for them. And so it was kind of good, because it was a fee for the user, but they were taking profit, so they were happy to pay a bit of a fee. And the service was really good. And then there was also, we would get kickbacks on like cashback and stuff from Yanni's credit card, my co-founder. He was the one buying everything, because I didn't have a credit card because I'm not American. Mate, he had the best credit score in North America, basically. He must, because we were buying $1 million worth of stuff a week or something. I don't know. Our numbers got pretty big pretty quickly. Wow. And so it was all on his credit card. So he was just scooping up this good credit score, which is great. Good for him. Love it.
Hello, sir. Please come this way. In every
Hello,
airport.
sir. Here's your private jet. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. So anyway, that was sort of the soiree into Bitcoin.
They seem to happen so organically, don't they? An idea or a small product, you just got to keep shooting and keep shooting and keep shooting, and then one of them will actually just take off. And so this was all the way back in 2013. In the very brief interactions we've had together, Mike, I know that you've recently exited the business. Yeah. So That's a hell of a long time to spend building a company. I personally have spent some time looking at trying to start companies. None of them have worked yet, touch wood, but they will one day, I'm sure.
Yeah,
But people often talk
they
about,
will.
you
Yep,
have to invest your life into building these things. So without going into all of the
absolutely.
ups and downs of that kind of, 8-year period,
Yeah,
what were some of the biggest
yeah.
challenges that you faced and what were some of the kind of highlights?
Oh, well, the highlights are the journey. The highlights is the tough days because so Yanni and I would call each other and basically we'd say something like, dude, have you got a sec to chat? And he'd be like, I'd be like, yes, or he'd be like, yes. And we'd say, oh, this is a good one. And a good one means here comes a fucking curveball that's going to basically be the worst thing you've ever heard. And so getting these new problems, they always get bigger and harder. And the funny thing is the biggest learning curve was be grateful for the problems you have today because they only get bigger. If you're going in the right direction, which is going, scaling up and growing as a company, your problems are going to get bigger and you got to graduate to these problems. Like, so I definitely think one is be grateful for the problems you have because they're usually a good thing. Like people complain about having to pay tax or whatever. Cool. You only have to pay tax if you've made money in the first place. So that's sort of a silver lining to it if you think about it from that direction.
Hmm.
I'm talking about like not whether the government's good or not, but when people are like, oh fuck, I've got to pay tax, when they make money, it's like, well, just remember you made money. There's a lot of people that got cooked this year. But yeah, so definitely understanding the lessons you learn. Psychological safety is the number one thing in any company for success. Psychological safety is really interesting because it doesn't mean, oh, my feelings, you got to give a fuck about my feelings and stuff. It's not like that. What it is you've got to respect me as an educated adult, and I've got to do the same. So if we're going to a group project together, or we're on an engineering team, there's no stupid question. Basically, that's the most important thing. Because if you're a smart person and we've hired you, or you've joined our team, you're not doing anyone a favor by keeping your brain locked up in your head. Like, fuck it. I don't care if that guy thinks he's smarter than you. No one's smarter than anyone here. And everyone's got the stupidest questions in the world and the smartest questions in the world. And that's good. That works for me because I ask the stupidest questions out of anyone in our company. Like, I would always be the first to ask. But that's a good thing. If I can ask the stupid question, damn right, any other person on the team should be able to ask him. So definitely thought that was one of the biggest takeaways in terms of, recipe for success. Always doesn't matter what anyone tells you. There's an absolute guarantee. And biggest takeaway is just, maintaining long relationships. It's a long game. That's really important. Wyre has been an infrastructure provider for 8 out of 11 years that this industry's been around. We'll call it 12, but like the industry of exchanges, we've been around for a minute. Never been hacked. We've never lost a piece of customer information, and that's a very big kind of medal of honor that I think we hold pretty high. But what I'm saying is to do that, you've really got to know where you're going. And it doesn't mean that you need to know the vision of your company, but you always need to have your next steps planned out. So my friend came over with COVID before, and I'm pretty sure he's given me COVID. So if I
Happy
sound like
days.
I'm coughing and shit, yeah, good to see you. But essentially those are the key takeaways. One, like really understanding your position in the market. Be really good at your position. Don't try and do everything. Especially we picked a couple of things really well. We never tripled down on anything. So I had my team that would always ask for, what's the vision? What's the this? If you look at the history of our product, we started and we pivoted like 5 or 6 times. And they're not pivots, but they're iterations. So, for instance, the architecture that you see today is still the same architecture that was refactored from 2014 when we did a whole server refactor. And basically, what that was is our engineering team and our architects were like, refactor this, and we're going to basically make this live forever, like as in basically make it a really extensible system. So we're going to do this once, and then we're going to have a really easy long-term plan. So all of our products, because it was architectured really well, it means that doing any kind of new product is actually not a huge distraction, and that makes it very good for iteration. So if you look at the company and how much it's had to iterate between 2014 and now, it's a very large amount. And so we've had to iterate a lot, we need to be really agile in terms of what our stack looks like. So definitely not doubling down on anything. And there's a reason why as well. If I'm the CEO of the company and I tell my team, hey, here's the vision for the company, and you join me based on a specific vision, if I change that a week later, that's not good because you're going to be like, dude. And I'm like, no, guys, there's a new vision. You're like, how much weight is behind this thought? You know, you've already kind of used this card on me. It doesn't really have much substance. So I'd never really given the team a vision. That's been a long-term thing until we were concrete that we had one. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't want to just say a vision just because investors would be like, so what's the vision? It's like, we don't fucking know what the vision is because we don't know what fucking industry this is yet. We don't even know what it's going to become. You know, so, and I saw a lot of companies that would paint themselves into a corner where their leader would talk about a vision and really quadruple down on it internally. But now they need to pivot and they're caught between a rock and a hard place because they've put all their chips on this vision and now all the team bought into it. And then you're like, oh, by the way, so yeah, the vision wasn't actually correct. We're going to have to change a bit. You're like, you got me all hyped for this thing. Now, is this going to change too? You know,
that's very counterintuitive, isn't it? Like I feel like the experience that I had through the space, like vision was key. You know, someone like Simon Sinek,
no, they
Start
all
with Why.
use, they love,
everyone loves
they
talking
love
about
that
it.
circle jerk bullshit because that's the playbook, that's the formula. But the reality is, I'll be honest with myself and my team. If I don't know what our vision is, I'm not going to try and say it. I'm going to be. I'd rather tell them, guys, we don't have a vision, but here's why. Because if they know as much as I do in the thought making process, they can correct me. They'll be like, dude, what do you mean no fucking vision yet? We need it because of X, Y, Z. Or they'll be like, no, that checks out. Okay, cool. Like, you know,
or like,
your team's going to help.
I just had an interaction with this customer and this customer just told me X, Y, Z. That actually means that you're talking complete crap. Look at what we're doing. Well, it's really interesting. Cool. Okay.
Yeah.
And so for the people out there, Mike, that are listening that don't know much about Wyre, what is the product today? Just if you could teach us a little bit about when you say infrastructure for exchange businesses.
Yeah. I'll give you a quick crash course.
Yeah, please.
Sure. So, you know, we've iterated a lot. Wyre was basically a product that we built ourselves going to market in the US. So we had to get all the licensing, do the compliance, get the bank accounts, get the exchange integrations, and kind of like to get going, it was a really hard process. It was 3 or 4 years of iterations and money and all this shit that my co-founder and I had to go through. And we were like, well, dude, if everyone's got to do this, this is going to cost arms and legs for everyone. Like, it's going to take a huge amount of time. It's going to cost a ton of money. And usually people use this stuff as the moat, but this industry doesn't really have time to do that because everyone's trying to move so quickly. So we thought it'd be better if we productized it and basically all the verify your identity, create a bank account, transfer money to your bank account, deposit, all these things that you use every time when you're going to buy or sell Bitcoins and stuff like that. We have sort of basically created all that, put it into little Lego blocks and put it into an API. And then developers come to us and they say, hey, we need to verify people's identities, create them a bank account, and we need to be able to accept deposits and convert that into Bitcoin. So that's our stack. And people come along and pluck away at it and use it for different things. So, you know, you've got platforms like, let's say, Casa, they're a self-custody solution. Those guys were using it for on-ramp. So they were taking ACH deposits from their customers. We worked with Blockstream Liquid. We were taking payments via Apple Pay and then converting that payment into Bitcoin, locking that on Liquid, and then converting that into Liquid BTC so that people could just in one swoop go from, you know, their Apple Pay card into something like Liquid Bitcoin, for example. They're just different use cases. So people plug and play it in different ways. But the idea is that we hand them the stack. So it's sort of like, here's everything we know how to do. And we use it for everything we do. And we process, you know, $25 billion a month worth of payment. It works for us. It probably could work for you too. We're not saying you have to use it. We're not saying you should use it forever. But we got value from it, getting to market, and hopefully you can too. So I think that was sort of the essence of everything for why when I say an infrastructure company, sorry, that's a very long elevator pitch, but just trying to give you guys context.
No,
you know,
it's great.
Yeah.
That phrase, Mike, selling shovels in a gold rush. There are tools that are required in order to access new markets. And that's actually not talking about gold as in gold diggers and, you know, crazy riches, but more just like, you can't actually get into the marketplace without certain things.
Yeah.
Wow. And you obviously you wouldn't have got to that point had you not been playing around in the market in the first place. That's what I like about it.
We only got there from fucking up ourselves. Like we realized it. And so that's the thing. A lot of our story is like that. We've only arrived where we are because we were in the space trying the thing before. I've always thought about it like Wyre started out as a big giant log, and every iteration is like one carve through the log, which eventually turns into a canoe. Do you know what I mean? It's like we've been chipping away at it and just iterating and iterating and iterating, not building new products. It's not this product, that product. It's all talking through the same API and the same stack and the same architecture. So it's sort of, yeah, it's been a very interesting journey. And I would say probably, well, it's definitely probably the hardest thing I've ever done in my life, like trying to keep your head screwed on and stay sane in an industry that operates 24/7 is really difficult, especially when it comes to money. And especially because we don't know what the fuck's happening in this space. I mean, now we've got way more ideas, but 2015, we had a bear market. But a bear market today, there's still 5-10 million users in a bear market. A bear market then was like, dude, has anyone had a visit to their website yet? It's like, nope. And,
Wow.
icy cold. And so
Wow.
businesses weren't sustainable then. So, you had to be very scrappy to understand where the next meal was coming from, so to speak.
Wow. That's a really cool story. So there's literally like zero traffic in the
Ah,
2015 bear market. Wow.
donuts, like just donuts. Yeah, it was brutal.
What are
It
we
was
doing here,
really
lads?
hard.
Fucking
No, no,
don't
no.
know.
Literally, yeah. Mum and dad on the phone. Hey, you're flying back to Australia anytime soon?
Yeah, you're
Like,
coming home, son.
is it done
That's
yet? Yeah,
funny.
yeah.
Wow, Mike,
But
great story. And so,
yeah,
okay, so fast forward back to where we are in the present day. You're no longer day-to-day operational in the business, and so you've sold your equity stake, I imagine, or maybe kept some. I don't know. You don't need to share the
I've still
details
got but
specifically,
I've
but
still got a portion. I stepped away as CEO
yeah,
2 years ago. So I was co-founder CEO up until 2 years ago. My co-founder stepped in and took the CEO role, and he's this current CEO. Him and
okay,
I still speak, talk to him. At the moment, there's a lot going on at the company. I still hold an equity position in the company, so still got my bags loaded up.
yep,
And look, it's a tough time right now for any company in the space. Equity markets are crushed. FTX has just shut the bed after 3 hours capital Celsius and all that shit.
yeah,
So that sucks all the money out of the whole ecosystem. Now, not if they've lost money, but so all the times now, my co-founder and I have been on the phone a bunch, just trying to navigate this market because if you're going out to raise or whatever you're doing with your company, it's all hands on deck right now. I've never seen more challenging market conditions in my life.
wow.
Yeah.
Because what I was intrigued by is, I'm assuming you have some more time on your hands. Once you've
Mm.
gone through this, let's call it decade-long entrepreneurial journey, the ups, the
Yeah.
downs, you've,
Yeah.
you've managed to get a bit of money out of it, I assume. What's next, and where does it take you? And I'm assuming, well, I know for a fact because you've already shared it with me. Your
Yeah.
Bitcoin vision is pretty big in terms of what you want to work on. Let's
Yeah.
take a bit more of a look towards the future, and how do you reorient yourself and remotivate yourself to move into something different?
Well, I think you stop. So I came back to Sydney during COVID or the end of COVID or whatever, and it's like 2020. And I stopped. The first thing I did was just turned everything off. I turned
Wow.
all my emails off, all my notifications, everything. Basically, trying to shrink my brain down to zero. So only thing I could do was exercise. I had to exercise every day. I had to eat 3 meals a day, and I had to sleep 8 hours a night. It's on the back of I'd eat 1 meal a day, maybe, and sleep probably 3 hours, 4 hours a night, maybe.
Whoa.
Like, so, you cooked your body. Everything in moderation, including moderation, is probably something I need to learn a bit better. But yeah, I mean, mainly the biggest takeaway for me was I just saw security as being the be all and end all. There is actually nothing else that matters, and security is only it. And that's like the number one theme that I learned while I was there. I was very fortunate. My engineering team would always remind us that security is it. Nothing else matters. If you don't have security, you don't have anything else. And so that led me to believe, like, well, how secure is Bitcoin? And, can anything break it? If so, what? And then I just got really down the rabbit hole on just this idea of, I had the goggles off now for a second, like, and I mean the fiat goggles. And like, when I say fiat goggles, I mean capitalism, need to buy everything, got to have things, got to wear the shirt, got to look like this person, got to look like that person, drive the car, have the watch, whatever it is, it's all fucking garbage. And I was like trying to rebuild my brain, and I was like, well, I don't really need that shit. That shit's not really adding value to anything. It's sort of all ephemeral. It's not really great. So I thought basically I had these beer goggles on from Bitcoin, basically, where it says everything bullshit but me. That's basically what I see when I see Bitcoin, because it's the only thing that's got a provable supply chain from start to finish. But if you compare anything, the t-shirt on my back, the food in my fridge, none of it is true. Like, not true, but it hasn't proven itself to be true yet, or, good and quality and stuff like that. And so for me, I was like looking at Bitcoin, it's just marvelous. Like the biggest thing for me that I came down to was Bitcoin is immutable. And that is like the biggest breakthrough in science history that we've ever had in the planet. No Egyptian, no Nikola Tesla, nobody has been able to accomplish this. And when I say immutable, I don't mean like, oh yeah, really hard to break. I mean like the color blue is immutable. The number 7 is immutable. The letter A is immutable. Like it's like baked into the universe now forever. That was mind blowing to me. So when I was looking at Bitcoin and like, there's Ethereum and all this bullshit, I've never really given a fuck about anything, including Bitcoin. The only thing I care about mainly is immutability, that something can't break. And that is what just glues me to Bitcoin now. It's unbelievable. The fact that this system, we can shoot, not exaggerating, this is literal examples. We have the technology to shoot an asteroid off course that's coming to our planet, which we did about 4 weeks ago or 5 weeks ago as a test. We can derail something that knocked out the dinosaurs or whatever, but we can't stop Bitcoin. And so to me, that's really cool. People say, what's Bitcoin? It's such a pet rock. I'm like, well, whatever, man. I've got a low set of standards and I like my pet rock just fine. It's immutable and it doesn't change. And you know what's really refreshing in this planet? Something that doesn't change, that just does what it says, and that's that. It's very simple. And I find that the philosophy behind Bitcoin is going to become more and more aggressive now because people think it's about making products from our old world, like the fiat economy, about advertising this and that and all this shit, and finding a way to put them all on chain. That's wrong. That's not going to happen. And I'll tell you, this is the read. One, people start changing their thought system from a wants-based system to a needs-based system. As energy becomes more challenging to acquire, as it becomes more expensive, as people start realizing they've lost a meaningful amount of sort of self-sovereign skills about how to maintain themselves, people are going to start figuring out their own energy circuits or systems, whatever that be. They're going to figure out their own food schedule and understanding that. We've had huge health scares now and huge education in what that food was. We used to call fast food food. We used to eat it and we used to know it was food. We used to know that smoking was good for you. We used to know that the earth was flat. We used to know that the earth was the center of the universe. If you think about our consciousness, how it's evolving over history, we have these huge lessons as a society, basically, where the lessons we've just learned is that fast food is bad for you. That was the 80s and 90s and call it 2000. Fast food is not food. It's bad for you. Okay, cool. The next thing we're probably going to learn is that, social media is not, information on the internet is not quality information. Like social media is fast food for your brain. All these kind of things. And so I've gone on a bit of a tangent, but these beer goggles coming off, these Bitcoin beer goggles, where it sort of sobered you up. Like, oh my God, what is this thing on my table? Why do I need that thing that I dust every morning? It's just taking up time. Like all these things, you start realizing it's got to be work. Like everyone's got to be working and value adding. And if it's not adding value, I don't really want it. Like, some dusty lamp in the corner that I've got that I use once every 6 months when people come over because it's the nice lamp. Cool. Now I got to fucking dust it every week. I think the attitude shifts towards more of now I've got to dust it every week. People aren't as attracted to things anymore as they once were, because I think we've all realized like there was this dream of things where rich was cool and rich was everything. But that was the 90s and 2000s where it felt like a celebrity, a movie star was like the top thing on earth because you had the girl, you had the cars, you had the money, you had the this. And that was sort of the idols that people had. Now it's nice to see the type of idols that people are having, which are these very intellectual type people that are having really powerful conversations. A lot of the people in the podcast world, for example, people are thirsty for meaningful content now, not bullshit really. We've seen every explosion. We've seen every alien invasion movie. Now, if you notice the trend, documentaries. People want the biopic. They want the documentaries because people have seen everything. Now we want to see the real shit. How did they do it? That's what we want to know. What's the method behind the madness? Everyone wants to know everything behind it now because we now know everything that exists and everything that's possible. Now we're digging into everything. So I just found this philosophy that Bitcoin has almost given me feels like it's like, oh, not given me, but it's given everyone. Everyone sees the world in a whole new light, I find, after you really kind of, get Bitcoin. And one of the things that a lot of people miss is they think, oh, I buy this coin and my life starts magically changing. It's like, no, no, no. You buy this coin, you start reading about this coin. You start reading about the coin, you start understanding the problems. You start understanding the problems, your time preference, because all this is time preference orientated. All of it becomes down. If you have a low time preference, Bitcoin teaches you almost financial discipline by holding. And that's a really, really important life skill that people don't have. Fiat economy is like dopamine driven, for lack of a better term, drugged up, really. Like they're drugged up on dopamine highs and they're all short term orientated. And short term's really good for certain things, but it's not good for a distributed system. And that's why Bitcoin sort of, it rewards the longest, the most diamond hands. Usually it rewards the best, but it's a counterintuitive idea. Everyone thinks it needs to do more. It's like, no, no, no. We do less with Bitcoin, and that's a good thing. We're not here to be everyone. The way that I think about Bitcoin is much more like the sun and the earth. So people, you hear these fucking people, they talk about, and look, credit to them, but they're just wrong. Like you hear people argue with me, like Ethereum people. They're like, oh, you can't do anything on Bitcoin, da da da. I'm like, cool, man. Like the earth is like Ethereum. There's roller coasters, there's playgrounds, there's shit everywhere. But at the end of the day, it's all sets its watch to the sun, and the sun is Bitcoin. It's the heaviest, literally, by definition, it is the heaviest man-made object that we've ever made. And what I say when I say man-made object is Bitcoin, while it's numbers and zeros and all that shit to us, it has a physical amount of energy that it is consuming every single day. So if we treat it like an animal or an object or a beast or something with physical properties, which it does, it's absolutely, it's like humanity's, Mona Lisa proof of work. It's unbelievable. And I think, we're sort of missing a lot of these beautiful things because they're getting swept up in the noise of what it isn't. And it's like, well, maybe it's not meant to, maybe what it isn't is all wrong, And sorry, I know I've been rambling and just sort of vomiting
it's brilliant, Mike.
word soup, but do you know what I mean? Like
There's so many things in there that resonate with me, but I think where I'd like to go, well, first point I'll make is that we all feel this. Like the closer you get to this proverbial rabbit hole that is Bitcoin, the more that you learn to start being curious, question things. How is that different? Why was that the case? Who taught me this?
Yes.
And these questions, they take you to a really fascinating place. And ultimately, as we're, spending time chatting on this podcast, it's fascinating what we're learning, and we want to teach people about our experience. And it's something that I'm actually just in the process of writing an article about. But I had a tweet recently that went pretty mad, and it was asking the question, how has Bitcoin changed your mindset? And it was amazing. There was 25,000 impressions on a tiny tweet from a small Twitter account, which is me. And of that, 0.6 of them responded. And I'm like, okay, that's kind of a weird proxy for Bitcoin maximalists. And then you look at what they're actually saying, and they're talking about hope, they're talking about future, they're talking about time preference, they're talking about fiat, savings. You're like, whoa, this is, and I'll write the article and I'll send it to you. But it's like a microcosm of, this is kind of how the future of humans will think, but it hasn't happened yet.
Yes,
what does this mean?
Into the future.
And that's what this podcast is all about. Who are you? What do you do with your life? What did you know before you came across Bitcoin? Why does that mean you have some kind of credibility to understand its value? And then what does it mean? And we don't know yet. And that's okay.
The thing is, when you say like, oh, that chick's really good looking. Oh, I don't think she is. You think she is, whatever, blah, blah, different tastes, different people, whatever floats your boat. It's like beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Value is in the eye of the beholder. So what you deem valuable and what I deem valuable, there might be two different things. You know why? Because something to be valuable, it needs to add value, which means it's got to be relative to the thing that it's adding value to. So if you've got a problem and I say, hey, this is really valuable, you're like, that doesn't add value to me. So it cannot ever solve my problem because it needs to add value to me. And so I think, I went to the Bitcoin Bush Bash maybe 2 weeks ago. Mate, 700 out of 10. I could not, I'm not even shilling it, mate. I had the best weekend I've had in a minute. And that's one of the things I remember is so important is community. Like, one of the organizers, he goes by the handle Wizard of Oz, he was saying that we're talking about the idea that the beautiful thing when you meet someone is they're 80% aligned with you. When you understand time preference, money, not spending, let's not debate currency. These general principles that kind of in the same, it adds value to multiple people in the audience, in the Bitcoin audience. You're saying that everyone's got this 80% alignment on principles and stuff, which is a great way to start conversations because we know we're quite aligned in certain very meaningful things in our life. Where the fun part is on the edges. What are you different? How are you different to me, but we still arrived at the same place, which is Bitcoin? And so you find these, I came from farming, or no, I came from truck driving, or I came from physics, or I came from, and everyone sort of arrived at a different place. We're all looking at the same thing, but it means something different to all of us almost. It's like Shallow Hal. I don't know if you remember that movie with Jack Black, the girl, Gwyneth Paltrow and Jack Black. Basically, Gwyneth Paltrow is gigantic, and he can't see that because he's so in love with her personality. So he just sees Gwyneth Paltrow as Gwyneth Paltrow, but everyone else can't see the same thing he can. And he's like, well, why the fuck does it matter if I see it this way? Who gives a shit? It's only meant to be me anyway. If I don't care, then you shouldn't. And that's kind of like Bitcoin. It's like everyone sees it a different way. But the beautiful thing is, and this is actually, not my thought, but my brother refers to like a quantum asset, which is, it's got multiple states at the same time, which it does, because to someone that's just gotten into it, it might be a store of value. But to someone that got in 2012, it's a unit of account, and the only thing they measure is how many Bitcoins they've got or how many sats they're stacking per day. Do you know what I mean? It's the same thing, just two different observers at two different points in time.
Someone who, has just been given a mobile phone for the first time, but didn't have a bank account before, or someone who is living in an area with hyperinflation, or you name it, it goes on and on and on.
See, this is the thing. Like, we look at how do I get yield on Bitcoin? Like, people talking about that. It's like, dude, if you go to Argentina, if my country has 10% inflation and I'm like in a stable currency relative to that, so that's when we think about these countries that have these astronomical amounts of inflation. They don't need a sales pitch. Remember, value is in the eye of the beholder. If I'm losing 120% in my currency every year, and I tell you, hey man, there's this currency called Bitcoin. Look, it's pretty volatile. I can jump, 30% here and there. I'd be like, volatile, sign me up. They don't need convincing. They've been stinging with the sales pitch on the tip of their tongue. Who's got a solution for me? But see, here we're very spoiled in the Western world. So we say, how many minutes to clear my payment? 10 minutes. Oh my God, that's not the future of money.
Faster.
You're missing man, and we're all missing the point. Faster, cheaper. You know what those words say to me? Old thinking, old legacy thinking. Those are marketing. So if you can't wait 10 minutes for something, and you're like, if you think that the network needs to change so much that you can't wait 10 minutes for something for absolute settlement on the heaviest thing that humanity's ever built, I'm sorry, man. You might have to rethink your time preference on everything. Do you know what I mean? People are just
absolutely.
People are just cracked down on this convenience, or now. It's like, dude, now doesn't mean quality. Why do you think we've got such shit in the planet? We've got shit in the water, shit in our bodies, shit in our food, shit everywhere. Because you guys, all of our expectations have become now, or I hate you and I'm never buying your product ever again. So what do you think they're going to do? If the customer expectations are there, they're going to try and figure out a way to meet them, and they'll compromise on quality the first thing they do. So anyway, but it is a very fiat-y mindset, and I think back to coming full circle with that idea between, it's so incredible watching people, their aha moments evolve in real time. We're all evolving, all of us, every person in the community, whether you've been here for 1 year or 10 years, we're all sort of leveling up together, and it's almost like we're all. Yeah, I just think about it that way. It's just, it is beautiful. In my head.
The point is that's okay. Learning together is okay. So
absolutely.
To paint the other side of that, if you're going to pitch your company that's going to be the next $1 billion Google, and you haven't got the perfect pitch deck, and you haven't got the perfect elevator pitch, and you haven't got the perfect vision, sorry, no money. It's like, well, hang on. No one has a fucking clue what's going to happen. So it's a ridiculous proxy for giving me money to build out an idea. Whereas this concept of we're learning, we don't know where it's going, it's changing our lives. We feel better. So make of that what you will. We find value in it. If you don't, that's fine. See you later. It's amazing.
Absolutely. And that's the thing. It's a totally different, it's not like a money choice. It's almost a brain function choice.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how does my brain function? Someone who's obsessed with Bitcoin, and I'm not talking about circle jerking kind of way. I'm saying this is really fucking cool technology, period. Like, yeah, you can make money and shit if you buy it early. Just find me something else that we've made as humans that's immutable, and then I'll rest my case. But other than that, we haven't ever done that. So I think that's a really cool thing. And so, the idea is that everyone's different, and we don't have all the answers. But you know what's the best thing? You're not meant to have all the answers. You're meant to know what you don't know. And that's what you need. So it's never about having the right answers. It's always about knowing what you don't know. Because if you know what you don't know, you can always plan for the worst and hope for the best. And if you've got a solution for all the worst case scenarios, then you definitely have the ability to solve less worst case scenarios. And so I enjoy that element of, we're all learning in real time. Everyone's trying to figure it out in real time, right? But that's okay. Like, like a company, like if investors ask me, people criticize Bitcoin. Well, what? Everyone's still, you said it was this then, and now it's not that. It's like, we're figuring it out. It's all good. But the net gain is that each individual is figuring it out at their own pace, at their own time, and the resources are growing and people can find good information, right? But it also means that everyone's sharing the knowledge at the same time. So all the problems I have, that someone might have already had them, and I can learn a lot faster instead of having to wait for a solution. And I think it's also a really good sign for Bitcoin as an, let's call it an object again. Let's treat it like a baby, right? That we're trying to nurture as a civilization. And we want this baby to have certain values, and we don't want those values to change or be manipulated long term. Bitcoin's community of varying levels of education. Some people have been there for a day, but they're so excited. Other people have been there for 10 years, but they're, different levels of education, whatever it is. That's really important, because Bitcoin's policy is not breaking and being immutable, that its only security that it has is its community. And its community's job is to essentially defend it, which is defend its principles. So if we think of it like a baby again, hey, don't try and manipulate him. Like, you can't try and change his numbers. Don't try and change his supply. Don't try and change his halvings, whatever it is. But don't speak to my kid like that. That's kind of what a Bitcoin maxi is in a way. Don't speak to my child that way. We don't do that in this house, which is, we don't print more tokens or whatever it is, but we don't do that in this house. And that's kind of how, when I think about Bitcoin maxis, because I feel like they get a bad rap. But if you think about it like that, it's like, no, this is a child that was born, which is Bitcoin, and it had a certain set of values, and we're just trying to keep those values the same. Forgive me. It's like we're all godparents. It's like we're all godparents, and Satoshi's dead. So Satoshi's dead, and he said, "Hey man, can you guys take care of my kid for me? You're a bunch of idiots." It's like, okay, yeah, what do you want us to do, boss? Look, I can't trust you guys for anything. Just make sure no one changes anything, would you? Yes, boss. We're on it. No worries. And that's kind of almost what it is. And that's actually the goal of the whole network. Yeah. So if those are the people really securing the network, then you want them to always hang around and be around, right? You need them. You need them for educational purposes. You need them for defense purposes. And so, because there's a time in the future, which is what, something that we've talked about just briefly, but about this time travel stuff. But how do you make sure that people are always looking at the chain, making sure that the chain preserves its state? So how do you make sure that, hey, what's the security budget for protecting my baby when I'm gone? So Satoshi's given us a security budget, which is the Bitcoin rewards. He said, hey, just mind my baby. I'll reward you guys every 10 minutes, it'll halve and stuff. And then when I can't reward you anymore, there's going to be 4 years that we'll have transaction fees. And that's, in 110 years or whatever. And so, yeah, I think, giving people an incentive to use it and to look at the chain and to monitor it and make sure no funny business is happening. That's what the Bitcoin miners do at the moment. And, that's what Bitcoin maxis do. And I think at the end of the day, they're not bad people. They're just principled, which is fine. And everyone's got a different, there's many ways to skin a cat. But, the Bitcoin maximalist, thought process, a lot of people think it's got a prickly demeanor. But at the end of the day, I'm like, well, no, it's a security system and people don't want shit to change. So I think that's okay. Good. Scream it from the rooftops. Unless the boss tells us what to change. That Satoshi comes out and says, no, let's change it. Even then, I'd still slap him if he told them introduce more coins.
You're the
Get out of that.
godfather. Get rid of him.
You're gone. Fuck off, dude. Yeah, like, sorry, dude.
It's
The
my baby
model's
now.
spoken. Well, it's our baby. That's it. Yeah. But does that make sense though? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, so
Like, do you see the angle I'm coming at it
let's
from?
try and unpack that a little bit. You share with me your presentation that you made at the Bitcoin Bush Bash, and just to zoom out a little bit about what the high level concept is from my understanding. So when the block rewards end in, let's say, roughly 100 years time, what incentive is there to protect the network? And what you're essentially doing is thinking about that problem. And that problem is very important, because if the security for the system disappears, then what does that mean? Well, all the value that we store in that network is gone. So where does that problem take you? And you've already touched on it slightly, but just talk us a bit about that kind of problem to solution process.
Yeah. Well, I mean, let's say 120 years ago from today, right? We've got energy issues in different countries based on Saudi Arabia's got lots of oil under the sand. Germany's had different challenges this year, but energy's become a big thing. And so in my head, I was like, well, I want people to keep mining during the periods when they're not getting a reward, but the miners they're going into uncharted territory. Think about like Magellan on a boat or Columbus on a boat traveling through the ocean. With no lighthouse at the end, it becomes much more demoralizing for Magellan or Christopher Columbus or whoever it is to keep pursuing, because it can feel like an eternal task, basically. So yeah, people might be getting paid, but the network will decay. There's no doubt about it. And that's a natural order of a distributed system, when the incentive model that is from the distributed system, which is the coins, not just the transaction fee, that when that dies, it's like a plant dying from no photosynthesis. Like it needs this X factor to exist. And so the idea was that, well, I want miners to know that there's money in the future coming. So I locked a lot of money in the future. So the block reward goes to 1 Satoshi, right? All the way down to 1 Satoshi. Then there's 4 years of none, and the chain finishes. Then what I did, well, I was like, well, let's put a lighthouse at the end of the tunnel for the guys, like the miners in 100 years is what I'm talking about. So what we've done is basically time locked an astronomically large amount of Bitcoin. So 50 million Satoshis is locked at the 7,140,000th block, which is, year 2138 or something like that, right? Guesstimate. What that's there for is to be like a beacon of hope for miners then, so that even if they know that there's nothing to mine for, like, oh, you get transaction fees, it will still encourage people to be like, nah, fuck it, I'm getting out of bed for this one. This is legit, because it's like a global lottery ticket for everyone, where everyone's, so basically I've locked these coins into the future, but I've also published the private key to access them. So basically these are anyone's coins for whoever is there at the time. So basically when the block arrives at 7140000, we're at 730,000 now or something like that. When that block arrives, basically the whole world will have the private key to steal 50 million Satoshi. And that makes me think, well, who will win that? The miner will win it. Who will mine the block? Because the reward is so big and there'll be so much energy anchored to it, like 50 million times whatever the network is. It's just astronomically large. If the reward was 1 Satoshi, so think about a block getting mined, right? In 120 years, a block gets mined. Think about how much energy is piling into the Bitcoin network from anywhere. Dude, you turn on your fridge, everyone's mining Bitcoins just to get a bar of it. But at this moment, there's going to be this one moment in the future where everyone's like, holy smokes, this is 50 million times the reward. I'm turning all my shit on just to try and win it. And it's basically like everyone hopefully will collaborate together so that the winning reward basically gets distributed to everyone. And then the idea was that everyone gets some form of a Satoshi or 1 Satoshi, and then everyone could be Satoshi Nakamoto for mining this mega block. But the amount of energy that it would take to mine it then, estimated, I'd put it at like the size of 100 suns or a black hole almost, quite literally, like by energy and weight. It's got to basically move. The amount of energy that it will take is the amount of energy that it would take to double spend a transaction today being in the future then. So if you think about that, how far away we are from the future, like this transaction happening, basically how they say, oh, they could double spend that if they wanted to and they had the network, the hash rate or whatever. They could go back and roll back a block and change it. Basically, when you do that, you have to have the whole network hash rate and some to be able to basically say this block isn't real because I'm the whole network. It's not real, and we're going to make a new real block. So the idea is like that amount of energy is astronomical. And so my goal was to have everyone on Earth work together, one, to get a bunch of money, which they're going to need at the time because energy is going to be really scarce and money is probably going to be even scarcer. In 120 years, the world's going to be so cool. So what this is essentially doing is like a 4-dimensional treasure map through time. The treasure bounty's there. Everyone's got the coordinates. All I want people to do is steal it. And because if they steal it, what it means to me is that I know that the chain is still running because someone actually got out of bed to steal it. So that's good. Bitcoin's still going 140 years later, but it also gives a chance for pushing the idea of collaborative mining or decentralized mining, because if everyone there, I don't think there'd be one person on Earth. Like statistically, it should be really unfavorable not to collaborate and not to try and partner with someone. It's basically like having a winning lotto ticket, right? If you've got a winning lotto ticket, and we all do, you and I, to lower variance, would be like, oh, do you want to just chop it? Like, if you get it or I get it, we'll go like give each other a cut. Okay, sweet. Yeah, that's what we do, most likely. And families would start doing that, and then people locally and stuff like that. So think about that, but for the whole world. That's a thought anyway. And that's all, I know we're limited on time and stuff like that. I'm sure we'll talk again in the future either way, but it's like that, that's all around the idea and the premise of physics and being able to slide energy, not from me to you, but from, today really far into the future. Because I'm sure there's a lot of countries right now that they wish that they had, people 100 years ago say, well, you go, we've locked a shit ton of energy, buried it under the ground, 1 kilometer underground for you. Use this at a time of need, and you're going to need it in years to come. So it's sort of about the opposite of, because to do something like this, by the way, it only gets more expensive to do because the nominal value of Bitcoin will go up. Like, I don't know how to explain it without saying this is not financial advice, but I think of Bitcoin like energy, and it cannot not consume more energy. Like, it's total addressable market. If you want to talk about who Bitcoin's customer base is, if I had a pitch deck and Bitcoin was my company, I'd say Bitcoin's total addressable market is to consume 100% of the Earth's energy. And I don't mean waste 100% of the Earth's energy. I'm saying consume it to secure value. And I think that's the direction it's heading. And I personally am not smart enough to understand what can break it. And I need to know what can break it to be able to plan more effectively. But right now I can't, because it's purely built on numbers and mathematics. There is no chink in the armor to break because it doesn't exist really. It's like trying to break a color or an equation that is factually correct. It doesn't exist, so you can't cut it in half. And so it's a bit of a tangent, bit of a rant. But
no, it's brilliant, Mike. The point is, well, multiple points, but what springs to mind, just to bring that to a close in a sense, is it's such a compelling story, isn't it? Like, what is this thing? What is Bitcoin? And we don't know really, but
like,
I've not heard anyone describe the total addressable market as the world's energy before. I've always had it described to me as money, which is therefore the global population of humans. But actually, it's consuming energy, and that's all different. It is. So Bitcoin's customer is energy, and that's a really interesting way of thinking about it. And the second thing I was wanting to draw on, Mike, was this idea of, just to use your analogy of a godparent. And because your responsibility is to look after this baby, you can train other generations of godparents, and you're looking at it holistically and going, okay, well, how do I care for this? And however many Bitcoiners there are out there in the world, they're all incentivized to think the same way. And that's, again, an extraordinary cultural phenomenon. What does it mean? We don't know. But
we don't know because we've never had something. And it's like, it's amazing. Like, we all do care about it in the same way. And this isn't like, maybe it is weird. Maybe I'm like that Korean guy that married his pillow or whatever. Sure, maybe. But like, I like Bitcoin. I think of it as a thing. It has added value, so much value to my life. I'm not talking about financial shit. I don't give a fuck about that. I'm talking about the mental clarity. Like, money filters every single thought you have within 2 degrees of separation. So you can't ever think of something that isn't filtered by money which is impossible because everything is filtered by money, whether we know it or not. Now you take that filter out in your brain, you replace it with like a clear one. Like it's literally like, a dirty filter in the vacuum. Fuck, everything looks totally different. It's awesome. It's like, oh my God, that's really cool. Oh my God, this is, and you just get like this new zest for life almost. Like, I'm not even kidding. I sound like a preacher or something, but I just mean, maybe it's my brain being proud of myself for investing a lot of time and energy into learning about this. I don't know. Maybe it's a placebo effect of feeling part of a community that I've missed. I don't know. But all I know is it's doing something. And I wish other people had the same something going on in their brain that I've got, because I'm like, this is great. Because now when you look at everything with a fresh understanding or a fresh filter, let's say, it's like looking at it from a new perspective. So old things become very interesting. I'm becoming so much more interested in history and things like that now, because I'm like, well, hold on, I want to take this frame mindset that I've understood from, studying Bitcoin for so long and being part of the community. I want to take that and now look at everything else in history that I used to observe, or look through physics lens and stuff like that. And I found it's just giving me a fresh perspective, novel ideas, and boosted my, I don't know, just creativity. It's cool.
Amazing,
I feel very fortunate. I feel so fortunate to be in this time of humanity where a lot of people would say otherwise. That's a shit time. We hate the earth. Look, we got problems. We're not perfect like anything. And I say that Bitcoin and humanity, obviously, when neither of them are perfect. But, we're giving it a go. And like, if you think about what's interesting in the history of anything, it's like, well, this is astronomical. Like we talk about where, there's nothing exciting going on. We're too young to discover the planet. We're too old to discover the planet, too young to discover the stars. I reckon that's going to be, because it's something I've thought, but I think Bitcoin is a gateway to a whole new world of science that we haven't seen, for the better. I think it's all exciting stuff. And if you're not getting value from it, I don't know how you're missing the value. It's just, just drink the Kool-Aid, basically. Just drink the Kool-Aid and thank everyone later. That's all you got to do.
Well, Mike, listen, I mean, I could easily run for 2 hours talking to you. You've mentioned so many cool things, but as I said, I try and keep it to an hour. And, anyone listening out there, get in touch with Mike if you're interested in his ideas and want to take them further or have anything to help him build off it. I'd like to make a quick shout out to your brother, Pete, who's been an incredible help for me over the last 2 years since I moved to Australia and getting into Bitcoin in the way that I have done, or more so than before. He's been so sharing with his time, and incredible guy. So thanks to him for putting us in touch as well. Mike, where can people reach you if they want to reach out?
They can find me. I'm on Twitter, and that's basically it. I don't really, I'm trying not to use my phone too much anymore, but I still use it too much. Yeah, find me on Twitter. I'm usually pretty open, and I don't really have many people following me, so I'm usually pretty responsive. I like talking to people on it, but I don't really have many conversations on it. So yeah.
Awesome.
Give me an inch, I'll take a mile.
Well, Mike, thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate it.
I really appreciate you having me. Thanks so much, Jake.
Okay, friends, nice work. You made it all the way to the end of the episode. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this conversation. As I said at the start, if you have any questions, then please don't hesitate to reach out. And if you enjoyed the episode, then please rate, like, subscribe, and share. That's it for now. Enjoy the rest of your day. All the best, Jake.